Okay, welcome back everybody. We are in Portage Lakes near Akron, Ohio, kind of in between Canton and Akron. It's a little lake community here, and we're gonna do some exploring on the mini motos here. I got Eric behind me. If you didn't check out the last video where we talked about big bikes versus little bikes, Eric and I are out on our mini motos. He's on a 2025 Grom. I'm on my 2023 Honda Monkey. So in the last video, we talked about big bikes versus small bikes, some of the reasons why myself and probably Eric would agree that we choose to ride these tiny little bikes all over the place. And I mentioned my crash in the last video, and so that's what I wanted to talk about in this video. So let me take you back in time. The year was 2006, and young Alex, imagine 18-year-old Alex or 17-year-old Alex on a beautiful silver 2001 Suzuki SV650. I was working at Best Buy retail as a digital technologies customer specialist, and I had the bike I think for about a year. I think I rode it a full season, and then I was into my second season. And same thing as this Monkey, I think I put like 3,000 or 4,000 miles on it in the first year. Just loving it. Like, it was so much fun riding that bike around, especially in high school. I was in I forget what it was called, like a post-secondary program my senior year of high school called marketing. I think it was just called marketing. But I was in class with my teacher, Mr. Kibler. Shout out to Mr. Kibler, huge influence and inspiration in my life. But the main reason I joined that class is because you got out of class early. And it was no secret, that was why everybody joined the class. But the benefit was that Mr. Kibler was awesome, and he actually taught me a lot of life lessons that honestly shaped a lot of who I am. But anyways, as it relates to the motorcycle, every day of senior year, I would get out of class at 11 a.m. So I'd show up to school at I think it was 7:45, go to school for a couple hours, and we got a road closed. Let's see what we got here. Yeah, so I'd go to school for a couple hours, and I'd get out of school at 11 a.m. I would walk out to the parking lot, and I remember I could see some of my friends and my classmates in the windows, everybody watching me leave school early. I felt so cool. And I would throw my leg over my 2001 SV650, and technically we were supposed to go to work, and I worked at Best Buy at the time part-time, but I didn't have work every single day, so a lot of times I just had a day to go ride, and that's what I would do. And then on the days where I'd work, I'd ride up to Fairlawn, Ohio at Best Buy store 285, represent, and I would work. I worked in the camera department originally, and then eventually I ended up working kind of in all the departments over the years, computers, appliances, TVs, and 2004 was such a cool era to be working at Best Buy. Kind of the peak or the end, I'd say, of like the retail heyday before Amazon and online shopping and everything. So I had this bike, and it was just so much fun. But it was towards the beginning of summer. I remember it was the day of my graduation party, so it must have been a Saturday or a Sunday. And we had a morning meeting. Sometimes like once a month or so at Best Buy, there would be a morning team meeting where everybody would show up. And back then, retail, they would have tons of employees. I feel like we had 100 plus employees at that one store. And so it was a pretty big deal. Nowadays, you go into a Best Buy and it's hard to find like any employees at all. They've had to compete with online stores, so I just feel like their budget for in-store associates has gone down the drain. This is super nice out here by the lake. So yeah, these morning meetings, they were at like 7 a.m., so like pretty early. I think it was 7, maybe it was 8. No, it was 7 because it was before the store opened for the day. Was riding to work, and the route that I took me on the highway just for a brief moment, and then immediately got off on a state route 18. There was this long winding exit ramp with a couple turns. It had a long left turn followed by a kind of a medium right turn, and I say turn, they weren't even turns, they were curves. And the way I remember it, and maybe my brain has generated these memories to make me feel better about myself, but the way I remember it is that I wasn't hot dogging it on this day. There had been times where I'd take those turns pretty quick, 50, 60, 70 miles an hour. But it was early, I was going to work, I wasn't trying to do anything dumb. But what had happened was some construction had started on that specific exit ramp. And in fact, they were repaving it, I believe. And so if you're ever on the highway when they're repaving, like the first step is they tear up the old concrete. And that's the phase that it was in. So old concrete was torn up, and what was left was like this like rough underbed that was still down there from before they were put the new pavement down. And so I was doing my thing, and that was probably the mistake that I made, is I was riding it the same way I rode it when it was in good condition or in better condition. And I was coming around that first left turn, and there was some gravel and just loose sediment, just rough stuff on the road. And I was in a turn leaning, and I hit it, and the bike came out from under me, lost traction. I low-sided, luckily, which means that you hit the ground first as opposed to the bike flipping you off up into the air. And I was a lot luckier than my bike was. My bike proceeded to go into the guardrail. The front tire must have hit one of the guardrail posts because it got totaled. Both front forks were completely smashed in. The front tire was smashed in. I hit the ground. I don't remember it. I remember feeling the traction give way below me, and I remember feeling like I was going down, knowing that I was going down, and then I remember getting up off the pavement. That's a cool truck. And so I think I was definitely in shock. I'll just recollect everything that I can remember. I remember getting up off the pavement, seeing my bike as I was getting up, and looking around. There were some cars that had stopped behind me that had come down the exit ramp, and the first people came up to me. I picked up my bike. I was trying to get it, see if I could ride it away. Like the adrenaline was pumping, and I wasn't really thinking. So I was trying to push it, and it wasn't moving. The front two forks, like I said, were broke, and the tire was kind of like smashed into the engine compartment. And I was trying to push this thing off, and the front tire just simply wouldn't roll. And some people drove up and kind of rolled by me and rolled their window down and said, "Are you okay? Do you need help?" And I said, "Yep, I'm absolutely fine. I'm all good. No need for help." And they just left. And I was just there. And eventually some other dude stopped, and he was helping me. He got the bike off the road. I remember sitting on the guardrail, and that's when I noticed that my leg was really bloody and bleeding. I gashed my knee really, really bad. Put like a huge crater in my kneecap. Luckily, I was wearing gear. I had a nice helmet on. I had a riding jacket on, similar to Eric's. It was a Joe Rocket riding jacket, and I had good gloves on. I didn't have any riding pants on, and of course, that was the part of me that really got messed up the most. I had a big, giant gash in my knee, like right in my kneecap. It was like an abrasion, but it was like a chunk was gone out of it. It wasn't like a cut. And so I went to the hospital. I guess before we get there, I saw that I was bleeding. My pants were all ripped up. There was rocks everywhere. That's one thing I remember about the whole experience, is just how many rocks were everywhere. In my hair, in my pants, in my underwear, in my shirt. It's every nook and cranny. In my helmet. The visor on my helmet was gone. I did hit my head, but luckily I had the helmet on. And I went over to the guardrail, and I was sitting there, and I called my dad. And like I said earlier, it was the day of my graduation party for my senior year of high school. And I was on my way to work, and I was literally, the exit ramp is right by Best Buy. So I think I knew what I was doing. I was on my way to work because there's a big Best Buy sign right there, literally. And so I called my dad, and my dad is ex-military and very pragmatic type of guy. And so he started asking me questions. He's like, "Do you remember your name? Do you remember your birthday? Do you remember who I am? Do you remember my name? Do you remember what day it is? What's going on today?" And he asked me, he's like, what do you got going on today? And I looked around, and I saw Best Buy, and I was like, I was going to work. And he was like, what else is going on today? And I had my graduation party that day, but I couldn't remember it. And he's like, you don't remember what we have planned for today? And I remember being like, no. So I definitely think I clunked my head pretty good. Luckily I had a helmet on, thank God. So it could have been way, way, way worse. My dad, the ambulance was on its way. My dad ended up beating the ambulance here, which is pretty impressive because it's like a 15-20 minute drive from his house, so he must have been cooking it. So yeah, Dad must have been hauling it to get there, and I would do the same thing if one of my kids now were in an accident. So the ambulance probably showed up and then there was nothing there but a wrecked bike. And we went to the hospital, they cleaned me up. The gash on my knee was so big that it was too big to stitch, and so what I ended up having to do was they put like this leg brace on me. They like bandaged it up and gauzed it up, and then they put this straight leg brace on me that I had to wear honestly for I think a good month or two, and I had to walk around with a straight leg while my knee healed. Luckily there was no damage to like the joint or my actual kneecap, and even to this day, knock on wood, I haven't had any issues with that knee. So I was super lucky. Beyond that, my jacket must have like flipped up over my back a little bit because my back was a little bit scraped up a little bit, or maybe rocks just got into my jacket and scratched me. But all in all, I was super lucky. I was able to walk away. The bike unfortunately was not so lucky. I never saw the bike again. I think it was turned over to insurance. If I remember correctly, I think I got a little bit of a payout for the bike. And then, yeah, I think I actually still had a loan on the bike. And so I was able to pay off the loan, and I think I used the rest of the money. I sold my truck. I had a 2000 Ford Ranger at the time, and I sold that, and I ended up getting my first Honda, the Honda Civic, which in a way, that started my obsession with Honda. It ultimately led me to this Honda Monkey. So that is the lesson, and they always told me, my dad, everybody who I rode with, they always told me, they said, Alex, that's a nice bike you got there. It's a lot of power. Remember, there's two types of riders. There's the riders who have been down, and then there's the riders who are going down. Speaking of which, so yeah, I think that was the saying. There's riders that have been down, and there's riders that are going down. So basically, moral of the story, if you ride, you need to accept that you are going to go down one way or another eventually if you choose to continue to ride. It's a risk that we all live with as riders, and the lesson that I learned from that is, number one, road conditions. I should have approached that situation with more precautions when I noticed that the concrete was torn up. Instead, I think I kind of rode it similarly to how I normally do, which was my number one mistake. And then the second lesson is that there are literally some roads that you can go down that lead you to an unavoidable situation. The situation that I put myself in, there was nothing that I could have done to avoid crashing, aside from not going down that road or treating it with more precaution. But by the time I got into that situation, there was no turning back. I was going down. And so that was a good lesson of just like how fast it happens. So if you're a rider out there, whether you ride big bikes, small bikes, cruiser bikes, sport bikes, whatever, hopefully this story time was helpful for you in some way or another. And like I talked about in the last video where I talked about big bikes versus small bikes and why I choose to ride a small bike, that is a big influence on my decision to get this smaller bike. And I have no regrets so far. It's been super nice. Riding a bike that is less capable performance-wise just inherently reduces your risk profile every time that you go out to ride. And so, for example, the fact that this bike very rarely gets up over 50 miles an hour, it just makes it inherently safer to ride. So that's it. That's my story time. Let me know if you have any questions about my experiences down in the comments below. I'm an open book. I've ridden quite a bit the past, over the years. So if you have any of your own experiences riding bikes, whether it's a crash, good experience, bad experience, lessons learned over your time, let me know down in the comments. I'll be down there chatting, and always appreciate you guys stopping by. So until next time, subscribe if you haven't yet. We'll see you. Peace.